So we were in this 15th floor apartment, desperately trying to open the windows, gasping and crying. And that was when the phone rang. No mobile phone, so it was a landline. And I went over to the phone, like, gasping. And my mum on the other end, like, oh my God, I've been trying to contact you for days and days. And because of the chaos going on, they hadn't been able to get through on the phone.
G'day and welcome to Global Horizons. I'm your host, Rob Malicki, coming to you today from Wurundjeri country in Melbourne. We're on the land of the Kulin Nation as well. And it's a great privilege to be podcasting from AIEC. And I'm stoked to be joined today by Marnie Watson, who's an old colleague. We've passed each other so many times at these conferences. We've chatted, but I've never really had a chance to sit down and have a really good conversation with you. So I'm super stoked for today.
Thank you, Rob. I got to tell you, seriously, like we've not really talked that much, but you've always been that man who's like super mysterious in his Akubra, wandering the conference halls. And I approached you actually for the first time last year because it's like, I can't not talk to you for another year. And it has been, I've been around for 27 years in this community.
It's amazing, isn't it? Well, thank you, because I feel like I've known you for a long time, sort of the crossing paths here and there and LinkedIn and the like. So this is going to be a lot of fun, and maybe the place for us to start is in Jakarta in 1998. Do you want to take us on a plane and take us to Jakarta?
Sure. So that was my first overseas work experience. University of New South Wales took a risk on me as a 21-year-old. Maybe I just turned 22, almost 22. So I was over there working for UNSW, 97, 98, 99. 98 was the beginning of the Asian financial crisis, so particularly difficult time. There was a situation of mass unemployment, there were food shortages, a lot of corruption, and essentially a lot of unrest around the country. And so there was a lot of tension on the streets. Students were the brave ones who were trying to make their voice heard, trying to bring about change in the government. And the reality of it was that, the culmination of that very ugly year of 1998 did result in the fall of Suharto. He'd been in power for 32 years, so it was a very big deal. But basically, there's this period in mid-1998, May, where we were essentially in a lockdown, no cars on the road, think COVID and those images we used to see. So it was just too much civil unrest on the streets. And so I had an apartment on the 15th floor, which by coincidence overlooked the MPR, the Parliament House in Jakarta. And every afternoon, my partner and I, during lockdown, would sit there and we would watch the build-up of the university students coming down from the airport side, university students coming down from the city side, police in the middle trying to guard Parliament House while the students were trying to get in to get their voices heard and to bring about change. So it was really there was a lot of fury, a lot of, these students were being particularly brave, but it became chillingly predictable, when you heard over the sound of the ambulances. Because what we learned was that became the sign that the police were about to let rip. And so that would be tear gas, rubber bullets, mass injuries. It did culminate in death of some students at the time as well. But you could really feel that shift that would come from the ambulances. And one of the things was that the Indonesian government and the media were denying what was happening on the streets. We were seeing it every day, but the media was denying it. So essentially, fueled by a mix of curiosity and youthful stupidity, my partner and I decided that we would venture out onto these massive freeways, Jakarta kind of freeways. We would venture out one evening because what would happen is that the skirmishes would happen. Everyone would go home as dusk came. The cleaners would come out. They would remove all evidence of the fights that had gone on. And the next day would come with no media coverage of the nastiness that we'd seen the police perpetrate. So we went out thinking, okay, we want to find evidence of what these brave students are doing. And so we searched for anything that would, show a bit of the truth. And we found it. We found a half tear gas canister and we found a headband with Reformasi written on it, which is the rally cry of the students, Reformation. And so we triumphantly brought home our trophies thinking we've got the evidence of what's been going on. But naively, we thought that we could neutralise the tear gas by washing it. And if anyone has any clue about how tear gas works, if you mix it with water, basically the irritants are amplified by liquid, which is why, when you get tear gas in your eyes, you're crying. So we were in this 15th floor apartment, desperately trying to open the windows, gasping and crying. And that was when the phone rang. No mobile phone, so it was a landline. And I went over to the phone, like, gasping. And my mum on the other end is like, oh, my God, I've been trying to contact you for days and days. And because of the chaos going on, they hadn't been able to get through on the phone. So I'm barely breathing, telling my mother that I had a cold. But because I hadn't communicated with them, they lived in a very isolated part of Vanuatu. They didn't have a television. I just thought they won't know what's happening. I'm not going to tell them. But they just happened to call at that exact moment when I stupidly had realised what tear gas and water do when they come together. So anyway, there you go. There endeth the story of tear gas. But let me be clear. I mean, that's my silly little story. But it was a horrific time with a lot of damage and death and destruction and pain for a lot of my Indonesian friends. So, there's a story in there, but it's also a very hard piece of history to remember for a lot of people.
I'm breathless as you're telling that story. There's so much tension in it, right? Because it's true. It's so human that you've got people that are trying to fight a system and, this image of students marching down this massive freeway towards a police barricade. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of us have seen those kind of iconic images on TV, and you were there.
Yeah, it was full on. Yeah, UNSW evacuated us a few days later. We all had to leave to head to the airport in the dark. The plane, we didn't actually have a plane to get on. They were desperately trying to get one of the emergency evacuation flights for us. But we had to go at 5 a.m. to make sure that it was dark because the cars were being raided as you passed through the toll gates. So we were told, go in the dark, drive really fast, do not stop, get yourselves to the airport. And so we did that, and we hung around the airport for about 12 hours or so. And then we were the lucky ones, of course. We had somewhere to go.
Yeah, wow. Isn't it a mind bend? It's relatively recent. And it's not the image of Indonesia that we have these days.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It's a country that's, all cred to them, the incredible change, just that move from it was exciting, but relatively corrupt society to where they've come to today.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah, democracy that's genuinely come about. Just things like the books you can now find in bookshops. I remember back in the day, there were certain books you just would never find, and very, very different country.
Do you think Australians understand Indonesia?
Oh, Rob, you're going to take us down the path of one of my other pet peeves, or one of my major pet peeves, and that is language learning.
Let's do it.
I believe that to understand a country, particularly your closest neighbour, you'd think you'd want to understand that one deeply and well, you need to take the time to ideally learn the language, because when you learn a language, you learn the culture, you learn about people, you learn about history, you understand people, you create friendships, you show respect. It's a sign of generosity. So your question was, do I think people understand Indonesia? Yeah, there's some amazing people out through Australia that speak Indonesian, understand Indonesia. But I was part of that cohort at university in the early 90s where learning Indonesian was right up there, something of pride, and there were so many of us, and it's just dropped off. I've got a son in year 12, and there's about 75,000, I think it is, students finishing the HSC this year. He's learning Mandarin. There's only 6% of those 75,000 students learning a language in year 12. Guess how many of them are learning an Asian language, Rob? So of the 6%, that's about 4,000. Let's do round maths.
I don't know, like 1,000?
Yeah, you're spot on. 25% of the 6% are doing an Asian language. That's 1,000 out of 75,000 kids. It's so, so sad and so incredibly frustrating what's happening.
Yeah, and I feel that, right? So my wife is French, and we speak French at home with my kids, and you notice the difference when you really have that language built in. It's like you're connected much more into that culture. So, yeah, it's nice to have an app on your phone that translates, and that stuff is happening almost more and more in real time. But until you've made that commitment to go deep on something, it's still so surface level, just being able to, translate the words, if that makes sense. Like, culture is so much more than just words.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly. But I guess my point, though, is as well, is like it's much more than the words, and that's why learning the language matters, because you do just get that. Liam Prince is one of my heroes. The work he's doing around his Achicha stuff and, his Ground Roots national language campaign that's going on at the moment, trying to encourage students going into university to learn a language is just, speaks to my heart. He's amazing.
Yeah, he's doing it, isn't he? I mean, a lot of people that are advocating, but you need that advocacy too to actually make that.
Well,
we
need government advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a big part of it.
You opened a door, a little crack there, and I want to go back and open that door. Parents living in remote Vanuatu. Open that for me. Like, unpack that for me.
So I am a child of a farmer and a stay-at-home mum who went to university at 47. She went to university for the first time. So when I'd already graduated. So essentially a child of a farmer and a mum who raised us beautifully. My dad's always been a different thinker. You know, whatever stereotypes people may have about farmers, that's not my dad. He's very green, very, renewables. And so when I was 9, he took us to Papua New Guinea. We were Australian volunteers abroad. So we went over to Papua New Guinea for 3 years, and my dad was primarily teaching the locals how to make a profit off the land, how to run cattle, copra, like coconuts. So that was 3 years in Papua New Guinea, and then life happened, and When I was in my 20s, living in Indonesia, Mum and Dad went off to Vanuatu to work on a cattle property on the island of Espiritu Santo, which was a beautiful area. They were there for about 6 years. Used to go on holidays there, but I can't own Vanuatu as something I know much about. But Mum was teaching then, so Mum taught in a very small older students, or high school kind of environment. Both Mum and Dad speak. Forgive me, Mum and Dad, I think it's Bislamar, is that what we call it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Bislamar. So yeah, that's the Vanuatu link.
Amazing. So where did you grow up then?
So I was born in Cowra, country kid.
Okay.
Moved to a property near Armidale to go to Papua New Guinea when I was 9. Came back, and now Mum and Dad, since I was, we came back 12, 13, we've been living down between Goulburn and Orange, equidistant between Goulburn and Orange on a farm, mostly sheep, farming down there.
Do you miss the country?
Although I've got to tell you, actually, there's a mum story in there that's kind of cool. I'll get back to that. Do I miss the country?
Yeah.
So much. I mean, I go back. I've got a little property that shares a boundary with Mum and Dad. So I go down there once a month, take my boys down, and you just feel a lightness, right? As soon as I hit that road between Goulburn and Crookwell, for me, that's where suddenly I feel this lightness come over me.
Yeah, how's that feel when you open the front gate?
Yeah, it's just beautiful, right? The stars and the silence and I don't know, just obviously I'm very different now, having lived in Asia for a long time and living in the city, living in Sydney now. And I just love who my dad is and what he brings to my boys and my mum, of course, but what my dad brings to, my boys in terms of another life. My boys they were born in Vietnam. They'd never lived in Australia until 3 years ago. So it's really important and powerful for them.
Yeah. This is like real Australia. I think this is the thing that really, when you sort of say that, I feel it. Spent plenty of time out in the country, and you start talking about the stars and the space, and like I feel that in my bones. And it's funny because if you've just grown up in the cities and you've never kind of spent time out in the country, it's like a different world. Yet this is Australia. This is like the heart of this place, pretty much.
Well, it is also too, it makes me really sad that sort of my age group, we didn't grow up with enough Indigenous learning. And that connection to country, that's a phrase I've only been taught as an adult in very recent years. Obviously I don't understand it like an Indigenous person may understand it, but I have a massive appreciation for that concept and the stewardship that our Indigenous people have provided to make sure our land is the incredible thing that it is in Australia.
I feel that too. Like, you're so right. Where I normally record this podcast from, I look out my window and we look out over Garigal National Park, which in Sydney is, we're on Garigal land, Garigal Darug country, but that's what I see from my window. And so that's where I trail run. I have such an affinity for that. And I'm getting to this point where it's almost overwhelming me, this hunger just to know more. I actually got on the internet. I was like, okay, where do I find out more? Where do I connect with that community? And it almost doesn't exist. Like, you can't find just an easy connection point to that. So when time permits, that's like very high on my list of things to just go and bury my head into. Yeah. Just to actually connect to that country, because that is where I live. Yeah. This is my place.
It's one of the things that makes me really proud of my mum. So my mum and dad are still together on the farm, but mum actually works and lives 8 hours away up on the New South Wales-Queensland border in a town called Wilmaringal. Wilmaringal is an entirely Indigenous community. There's, less than 10 kids in the K to 6 school there, single teacher school. And just her stories she comes home with of just basic learnings of, the kids didn't come to school today because of emu egg collection week or time, and just all these little learnings that we just, we never were given.
That is Australia.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love it. Yeah, okay, so you opened the door on that. You were like, I got a good mum story.
That was it. That's done.
Oh,
we're moving on. Oh, no, actually, there is another one.
Yeah, hit me.
I've got to tell this story right now. But so her kids were in the regional swimming relay. So the kids swim in the local river. So they swim against the tide so that they get strength. They don't have a swimming pool.
Can I just take a quick a quick pause? So where is this close to? Are we kind of like Burke country, further west,
Further
east,
north.
further north?
Further north. So up near the Queensland, New South Wales border, out west.
Further west.
It's very, very dry.
Okay, I'm with you.
Very, very hot.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
And so these kids, even though they don't have a pool, they're pretty good swimmers because they're swimming in the river. And so they won regionals, zone and then regionals, and then they had to come to state, which was in Sydney, at the Sydney Olympic Park. This was back in April this year. These kids have never been to Sydney. And so my mum took the kids on the plane to Sydney, and their families, mum, dad, uncle, auntie, grandma, granddad, nieces, nephews, they all hired buses and they bussed themselves the 8 hours to Sydney to watch the kids swim. I went out there. I think it was a Thursday afternoon, Friday afternoon, went out there and watched them with my son. And it was just the most beautiful thing because I was on the phone to mum going, I can't work out where you are in Sydney Olympic Stadium, and mum's like, just listen for us. And there's this massive Wilmaringal community just chanting for their little fellas as they were swimming. It was beautiful. Massive Indigenous community there, cheering for their little fellas. It was very special.
This is beautiful. I love it. I can see that, right? Just the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And you said your kids were born in Vietnam.
They were. Yeah.
Only came here 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Tell me the story. So how did you end up in Vietnam?
So I had originally gone to Indonesia with great intention. I spoke Indonesian. UNSW were very generous about taking a risk on a youngster like me, but using my language capability. I then came back to Australia for a year, wanted to go back to Southeast Asia and ended up joining study group. A study group had an opportunity in Singapore, in Taiwan, or in Vietnam. Vietnam sounded like the most out there opportunity. So I took the opportunity that seemed the most unusual. So, yeah, I went there with that classic story of, one suitcase, a boyfriend, and an intention of staying for 2 years. I left 11 years later with a husband who was the boyfriend, with a husband, 2 kids, a dog, a cat, 33 cubic metres of shipping container. Well, away we went to Singapore. So, so they were born in Vietnam when they were still little. When they were 5 and 3, we then moved to Singapore. So they'd been in Singapore until COVID, and then in about January 2021, COVID finally got us. That realisation that I may be offshore, I may be a traveller, but the idea that I can't see my family, particularly if they're quite sick, was just a little bit too much. And so we made that call to go back to Australia, which I never thought I would do. I never thought my kids would go to school in Australia.
Wow.
And it's a beautiful thing. They're at school with their cousins. My in-laws live up the road. It's very special.
Effective content in international education is about consistency, quality, and clarity. It tells a story that connects in a format that works with your channels. Talk to the team at Insider, an award-winning creative agency focused on international education. Visit insiderstudios.com.au for more.
When I say Vietnam to you, what image comes into your head?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. What image comes into my head?
First one.
Incredible people in a very full-on manic environment.
For those people
beautiful
who haven't been there, paint a picture for me. What's in your mind? What are you seeing?
So what am I seeing?
Where were you guys? Sorry.
Well, it's in Ho Chi Minh City.
Ho Chi. Okay.
Ho Chi Minh City, yeah. So what am I seeing? What am I feeling? So you can immediately feel the wetness on your skin, the humidity, which I love. I'm built for living on the equator. So yeah, the humidity, the sounds of the motorbike beeping, people everywhere, just constant movement. Doesn't matter if the street's one way, of course, it's every way. Potholes, I can never stand on I find walking on footpaths very challenging, just conceptually. But just people are so incredibly driven and successful and passionate and friendly and kind and helpful. It was the best place to have children because everybody wants to be a part of your kids' community in a beautiful, generous way. I had an amazing team of staff there. Over 11 years, I worked with a lot of Vietnamese team members, and they're all so can do, anything's possible, give me more, yeah.
How's it been for your boys, flying into Australia and then kind of dropping into a very different context?
Yeah, poor little possums. We actually had to do the 2 weeks of quarantine, as many of us did.
Oh, yeah, wow, yeah, of course.
So we came back, 2 weeks of quarantine, and then literally the day they came out, it was the 28th of Jan or whatever, it was first day of school. So straight off to buy their school uniforms, because you couldn't buy them beforehand, so buy their school uniforms on first day of school and into school. But children are resilient. I mean, you know that, Rob, from your own life experience. Kids are incredibly resilient. So within a couple of weeks, they were okay.
I think that experience is really good for kids too, actually, to be just dropped into something completely new.
Yeah.
Sink or swim. They always swim.
Yeah.
But there's something in there that just builds a muscle that allows them to adapt. But that's what I'm seeing with my kids, when the business closed and we went travelling for 2 years and all this kind of stuff. But now we see the difference between their experiences. And I don't say this in a brag way. It's a product of circumstance, but difference between their experience and kids in their friendship groups.
Yeah.
And our kids just kind of like, oh, well, that's the way it is. Like, they just kind of roll with some stuff, whereas other kids, it's a bit more of a shock, I suppose.
Yeah, it does. It makes them incredibly resilient.
Yeah. Worldly.
Yeah, they're just amazing. I mean, even though this is maybe a silly, trivial example that maybe we can cut out of this storytelling here, but we came back to Australia. We were living in a house for 2 years. And then 2 years in, we decided we would move house in Sydney. So no big deal, right?
Yeah.
But I was concerned because I was just trying to give them some consistency. And I said, we're moving house. And, the first thing they do, they both jump on realestate.com and they start searching. So instead of having where will it be? What does it mean? How far is it to travel to school? What's the impact on me? It's how do we get involved with this change opportunity? Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's actually like a real life skill, isn't it? At some point, you're going to have to do that for yourself. So you might as well do it when you're young, I reckon. Yeah, that's super cool. And so how about for you, like work-wise, in terms of the culture of having worked in Vietnam and offshore for so long, and then stepping back into Australia, has that been surprising in some way for you, or has it just been very natural?
Interesting question. So I think the stepping stone from Vietnam to Singapore, so remembering I came home from Singapore, where I'd been for 9 years. Singapore's Singapore's like living in Sydney just without the family, it's that kind of environment. So not a significant change. I think the other thing, Rob, I'm in a global role. So even though I'm based in Australia, my team are actually in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in India, in the US, in the UK, wherever. So I'm still getting that international flavour to what I'm doing. Yeah, no, it's just another environment doing similar fabulous work. I think I tell you what, the big one that really I struggle with is how far we are from anywhere. So the travel time, because I'm used to being in Singapore or Vietnam or Jakarta, where you can travel anywhere pretty easily. Australia, you've got to get 8 hours first of all before you start the next leg of where you're going. So it's that one, and our time zone. Working in a global role, it means that you're doing a lot of night times. And so, time zones mess with my head a bit.
That's certainly true. What's the most interesting place you work with? Or like right now, right? Because our interest in different countries and different places shifts all the time. But where's kind of like really got your attention, your interests? And I'm thinking more the kind of cultural, personal interest rather than the work side of things.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So before coming to Australia, I'd been in a global role. So I'd had a team based in India. I was, responsible for our India activities, but I'd never really spent a lot of time there. I'd visited. I'd done that stereotypical visiting. Whereas now, because India is our core, our hub, that's where our business actually began 15 years ago. So it's the real heart of who we are as an organisation. It's where my finance team are, the HR team, bulk of our people. And so I've spent a lot more time thinking about and learning about India. And I'm, let's acknowledge it is Duolingo, so it's not giving me quite the depth of culture I would like. But I'm learning Hindi. I'm very excited. I've progressed to sentences rather than just sounds.
Awesome. Hindi's on my Duolingo too.
I heard you speak Hindi the other day on one of your LinkedIn videos.
I cheated with that though.
Did you? Because I have to do a Diwali message for my team, and I'm like, how did you cheat?
There's an AI platform called, I think it's HeyGen, HEY as in hey, and GEN as in generative.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I did it on HeyGen.
Okay.
And you can upload a video and it will translate into another language, but it makes your lips move.
I'm so excited.
So if you saw that video, you're like, oh my God, Maliki speaks Hindi.
I was totally respecting.
You were totally, yeah. No, it was just me playing around with AI.
Oh my goodness me.
And it's very convincing. You know what came out of that video, actually was quite funny, is I've got quite a large Indian audience that follows my YouTube channel, and maybe like 20% of my audience is from India. And they actually wrote, and they said, probably like half a dozen guys said, oh, don't put subtitles in Hindi, it's too slow to read, put it in English. So, but they didn't even pick up on the fact that it was generated either. And the only reason you could tell that it was AI was because at some point I moved my hand like this and my hand disappears. because the AI is trying to make your voice, your mouth.
Oh, that's so very cool, though. I am absolutely getting on Hey Jen. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure it's Hey Jen.
Hopefully none of my team in India are listening, because when I do their Diwali message momentarily, it might be Hey Jen.
Yeah, exactly. Be blown away. And this is a fascinating thing, right? Because in a world where, Rob sitting in Australia can change his video into Hindi, I wonder what that actually means. Does the audience appreciate that? Or am I a fraud?
Yeah. Yeah, look, this is a very deep discussion, Rob, if we're going down the AI path, and I'm not prepared. I'm not necessarily prepared to have this discussion. But what I would say is that, look, I'm no expert by any means, but I think the AI thing is exciting. I know there's a lot of fear. I know that I need to learn a whole lot more about it, and I know it's dangerous. I don't want to be naive, but just think there's really exciting parts to it and ways that we can be using it. And living in a household, as you are, living in a household of young people, just watching them, the video the other day of your daughter, or the story the other day about your daughter making her little website or whatever she was doing. It's like when you're living, I know that's not AI, but when you're living with tech-hungry kids, it takes away the fear. I don't always approve of it or like it, but I find it exciting. There you go. There's my non-analytical answer for you.
I like that. You've reassured me, because it makes me feel less like a fraud. Like, because my instinct is like, I've hacked that. It's not actually me. I can't actually talk to you in Hindi. Therefore, I'm kind of misleading you. But that's kind of true, isn't it? It's like, well, what I'm trying to do is actually put myself more into the shoes of the audience and deliver my value to them in that way.
Absolutely. And I've
I think
encouraged
that's legit.
I've encouraged my team members who have incredible, intellectual and operational capability, but don't necessarily write English as well as they should when they're dealing with, international universities. Absolutely encourage them to take their emails and just shove it through AI, correct your email, and off you go, and change the tone. This is a more friendly university. This is a more difficult university. So change your tone. Honestly, it's great for them. I love their emails.
You identify those for me after we finish recording, yeah. Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Our new project, Choosing a Uni, is all about that. It's like using this tech to help people really discover their path. Mm-hmm. We've run tests with the technology where Year 12 kid who has never known what they wanted to do with their life goes through and does this, takes a while, 25-minute quiz, but gets to the end and it's like, boom, this could suit you. And literally, I've seen a human have a physical reaction, that being like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what is this thing? I never would have found that.
And the seed planting of that, right?
Exactly.
Like, it doesn't mean that it's the decision maker. It's
Correct.
the opening your eyes. Yeah. Very, very clever. I've got my children hanging out on your Choose Your Uni. There we go.
So let's back up. So what is it about India right now that's got you fascinated?
Well, you told me not to talk about the work side. We're trying to talk about the cultural side.
Let's go work. If it's work, let's go there.
Well, it's just, India can't be ignored. I think that's the massive takeaway. With a population, but it has the youth demographics, the passion for education, the aspirational nature. Yeah, the hunger and aspiration. Yeah, it's just we've got about, putting me on the spot now, but we must have about 200 team members in India. And that means, I come from a background where, I had an office of 5 or 10 or whatever it was, but when you've got this massive team, you're just getting this incredible cross-section of people, of age groups, of, the different states they've come from. And so I guess I'm just learning a whole lot more about the country in a different way. And the respect is deepening and deepening. I already respected what was going on there, but it's just getting a little bit deeper and more personal.
What do you reckon 12-year-old Marnie made of where you are now?
Ooh, interesting.
Maybe not 12-year-old, whatever age. Pick your age. But
well, you see, at 12, I'd just come back from Papua New Guinea and was desperately miserable in Australia. I found it really hard coming back to go to high school in Australia. So I think that Marnie would have gone, yeah, sure, absolutely. You went and lived in Vietnam or Indonesia. Of course you did. But 8-year-old Marnie, before I went to Papua New Guinea, I think about that a lot, right? I was a country kid going to a school with only blonde, blue-eyed kids. There was no languages in my house. So, yeah, I think, going to PNG blew my mind. I was homeschooled. I was playing with the local village kids. It was very rural. So, yeah, I could never have imagined this life. And I'm so very, very grateful for those 3 years as a 9-year-old that I went abroad. And
what was it that gave your parents the courage to go and do that? Because that's a massive thing. What led them there?
It's an answer that I need to get deeper on with my dad. I know my dad wanted to go back in the 70s, so just after PNG got independence in 75. I know he'd wanted to go then, but we were very little. I was born in 75, giving all the details away. And so that didn't happen. We went over in 84. So I don't know, my dad always had this passion in him. I think mum and dad, they both had this passion for giving back, power of education, not necessarily university educated, but the power of teaching, sharing, learning. And that was the whole thing about being volunteers abroad. You're going over to try and share your knowledge, help developing nations. So I don't know, I think it was just in both of them, and probably particularly driven by dad, but then mum was absolutely amongst it and did an incredible job of coping in really challenging. We had no electricity. We were crazy isolated, and the things my mum had to deal with were, deep respect for her and the changes.
Yeah, like as a parent, that sends shivers down my spine. I think that would almost be crippling to me to actually commit to an experience like that. Now, the medical stuff is the most frightening. So, well, what happens if something goes wrong? Okay, we know that it's probably unlikely to go wrong, but it's kind of like the if can hold us back so much in life.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than just going for it.
It is amazing, right? And I think I was just talking to the newcomers group here at AIEC and just saying, like, my entire life I've just said yes to opportunities. And I know you're supposed to be taught how to say no to things, but I've always just said yes. And yes has just opened up doors. And I think that yes comes from Mum and Dad did something crazy with us, and it was the best thing ever. I mean, I had a 2-year-old sister. I was 9. I had a 12-year-old sister. The three daughters, my mum and dad, and you paid a local wage as Australian volunteers abroad, which is why, we really had nothing for a long time. Yeah, say yes. It was amazing.
In remote PNG, exactly. Like, what does that do? Of course, it just drives a can-do mentality, I reckon.
Yeah, anything's possible.
Yeah. What's the craziest thing you've said yes to then?
Craziest thing I've done, or the craziest thing I've said yes to?
Well, we're talking about saying yes.
Yeah, okay.
So while I'll let you think, I'll tell you a story. Like, this is how funny things can impact your life. I saw an Instagram reel, and the guy on the Instagram reel was talking about how the last thing he thinks before he goes to bed and the first thing he does when he gets up is think to himself, everybody's going to say yes to me today.
Mm.
And this is only recent for me. It's only been about a month. But, oh my God, it almost rewires the way that you approach things when you go into the day. Just looking, everyone's going to say yes to me today.
Yeah.
It really just tempts you to dare, right? But that's the segue. What's the craziest thing you've said yes to? Other than a podcast interview at AIEC.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I should have been quicker on that one. I could have taken that. I don't know, the craziest thing I've said yes to. I agreed to do a work project, which was about trying out the idea of doing a direct recruitment model, because we were primarily through agents, where we bought a bus and we gutted a bus, and then we put in an English testing section at the back, and we put in one of those experience domes where it's got smell and the seat moves and you're watching a video of what it's like to study in Australia. And they had a little section up the front of the bus, which was for us to present and talk about. But I do remember that. I remember walking through this big old revolting dusty part of Ho Chi Minh City with all these old skeletons of buses, because we were trying to buy a second-hand bus that we could gut. So I don't know, saying yes, I mean, it was a great project. It was very fun, but saying to yes at the time when I was wandering around this bizarre place with all these old Russian buses in Ho Chi Minh City, saying yes to that felt a bit stupid for a while there.
The thing is I think organisations have to try this kind of stuff, right? You never know what's going to work and what's not. Like, it's not up to you and me. We can have amazing brand sense, but it's not us who decides if it's a good brand or not. It's the audience that decides if it's a good brand, a good idea, a good initiative. So until you actually try some of this stuff, you don't know. So committing to those kind of crazy ideas sometimes is
it's a fun one.
Just a necessary.
Exactly. I mean, that's you and your entrepreneurial thing, right? It's your very nature.
Yeah, is it my nature?
Isn't it your nature? Oh, interesting.
Is it my nature? I don't know. I need to think about that. That's an interesting question.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely appreciate it from an entrepreneurial perspective. Like, I need to try things and then collect the feedback on what works and what doesn't, and then do more of what works and less of what doesn't. It is maybe a learned skill, but is it nature? I don't know. So you've given me something to reflect on.
You can go away for my podcast that I'm going to create, so you can come and be interviewed.
Yeah, awesome. What are you most proud of in your work at the moment? Could be anything.
most proud of in our work? We do a lot of great things for a lot of great universities. Proud of that, proud of the team that work with that. But ultimately, it's probably the giving back angle that really matters. So I had a very extraordinary privileged opportunity to go to Rajasthan last year on a work trip. We were going to Rajasthan because there is a school there called the VEERNI, VEERNI, the VEERNI Literacy Program, VEERNI Literacy Institute. Basically, they're an organisation funded by a woman in Switzerland, actually, who have a group of educators, social workers, health workers, who go around a 500-kilometre radius around Rajasthan from this particular boarding school. And they are choosing the poorest of poor 12 to 18-year-olds. They're looking for 12-year-olds to put them into this boarding school for 6 years where they feed, they house, and they educate these little girls. And often these little girls are child brides. And so they are, as I say, choosing the poorest of poor and often trying to target child brides, because often what will happen is the girls will be married off at 11, 12, but they won't move to their husband's family until they're about 15 or 16. So they've got this 3-4 year window. And so these girls are put into this VEERNI Institute, and what often happens is by the time they reach 15, 16, they have to commit to 6 years of being at school. The parents have to sign a, will stay there. So then that means they're staying till 18. So when they're about 15 or 16, the husband's parents start to get antsy and frustrated and will often annul the marriages. So first of all, you've got this, I would, in my perspective on the world, win in that context. Then you've got these little girls who are being educated in a way they would never have been educated. And the way the VEERNI team do it, there's booklets and booklets of stories about the girls, but there's a few up on the board that I recall where, one's become a policewoman in her local community, one's become a manicurist, one's gone off to university, there's a few nurses. Like, they're just, not only are they educated and having a different life, but they're actually going out to these extraordinary careers and changing their entire family's future. So anyway, how did we get there? I'm proud of that because we fund that. We sponsor the VEERNI Institute, and we do that through every time we're at a conference. We'll organise a 5-kilometre run, 5-kilometre charity walk or run. There's no excuse. And for every person who turns up on that morning, we just count everyone on arrival, and we Acumen donate $50 to the VEERNI Institute for everyone who runs. So we've done that. We're doing that at AIEC in Melbourne. We did it at API in Perth. We did it at NAFSA in New Orleans. We did it at Adelaide last year. So there's a good amount of money that we're building up to support this. And people can donate directly to the VEERNI Institute if they want to, but that's our contribution, and it makes me very proud. It's education, it's young women, and it's making massive, genuine change.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm coming to run tomorrow, so it maybe dates the podcast a little bit, but I'm coming. Oh no, it's not tomorrow. It's Thursday morning. Coming out for my little 5K trot. But nothing has as much return on investment than girls' education in the developing world. Full stop. Like at the end. Yeah, I'm there. 100%.
Yeah.
Good on you guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. If you could get on a plane tomorrow and go anywhere, direct from Melbourne, no stopovers, where would you go and why?
Oh, Rob, my answer is going to be so boring. I'm sorry it's so boring, but my answer is that I would go to Vietnam. It's where my best friends are.
Oh, there we go. That makes sense.
It's my best friends. I mean, there's a woman, Thương, who I met when I literally met her the first week I arrived in Ho Chi Minh City back in 2002. She was an AusAid scholar, actually. She'd just come back from her studies in Queensland at QUT. I met her because I was interviewing her for a job with me. It was my first staff member back in 2002. And she's incredibly special to me because here's this woman who grew up in rural Vietnam in the late 1970s, early 1980s. Very poor, very difficult food situation. I'm a country kid who grew up in Australia. Very, very different environments. We come together, and she's probably the person I understand the most in the world. Like, just her values around family and children and career. She's very ambitious, career, but being a country kid and wanting to get back to the country. And it's all these parts. So I'd go to Vietnam, and it's because of friends, of the people. I mean, yeah, it's a beautiful country. There's lots of adventures I haven't done, but I miss my friends there.
What meal would you eat? Let's face it, the food is just awesome.
Food's amazing. I'm actually laughing because if my husband's listening, he'll laugh a lot at my next comment. But bun bo hui. So bun bo hui is a when we first got there, we thought it was a child's knee in the soup. It's a pig knee. But it's this awesome spicy noodle soup from Hue, from the middle of Vietnam. And no, that's not what I would eat. So that was a joke.
You had me going now. It's just like you are way more courageous than I am.
No, look, honestly, any Vietnamese food, it's perfect, right? It's so fresh. But I'm a bit of a sucker for the spicier food, which is much more sort of central rather than sort of southern or northern.
Okay, let's wrap there because there are cocktails that are starting to be served or glasses of wine. So it's probably that. Our listeners have got one tonight. So
Yes,
I think I'm going to come join you guys as well. So that's amazing. Marnie, it's been awesome to spend some time with you here at AIEC. And I love the stories. And I'm really looking forward to doing this again with you at some point in future. Thanks so much for joining me on Global Horizons.
Rob, thank you so much. I'll practice my storytelling watching your videos.
Oh,
thank
you know what? This has been incredible. Like when we sat down before we hit record and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm not a good story. Your storytelling is absolutely first rate.
You're very kind.
I'm not just saying that. That's the truth. So I really appreciate it.
You're amazing, Rob. Thank you so much.
The Global Horizons podcast is brought to you by the Global Society, Australia's learning abroad support company. For about 10 years, the Global Society has been supporting Australian learning abroad teams with technology, training, consulting, strategy, marketing, you name it. We all know that learning abroad is time-consuming and complex, so if your team could use a little bit of extra support, reach out to the Global Society, globalsociety.com.au.
Today's episode was recorded on Garigal land in Sydney, and we pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Thank you. See you next time.